It was October 2023 and the High Court in Accra was tense. You could hear a pin drop. Before Justice Eric J. Balfour was a man once celebrated as a finance titan, William Essien, once a banking guru and CEO of Capital Bank. His misdeeds had caught up with him and he was facing a very harsh accountability. Mr. Essien's bank, Capital Bank, had collapsed during the banking crisis and the state wanted answers. They sought accountability. They came after Essien with everything they had. They slapped him with a sprawling charge sheet replete with offenses of conspiracy to steal, stealing, and money laundering. Numbers were simply staggering. On the first couple of counts alone, he was accused of stealing 100 million Ghana cedis, with tens of millions more stacked on top on the other counts. Some of these monies were said to have been delivered to him in duke bags. To say that these allegations were serious would be a massive understatement. This was the kind of money that could build hospitals, roads, and schools. Like I said, the numbers were simply staggering. The trial dragged on for more than 3 years. The state brought 17 witnesses to the courtroom, each of them laying small bricks of guilt around Essien. The evidence was mounting, and the walls appeared to be closing in. But then in December 2022, he made a strategic shift. Essien decided to play a different card entirely. Under Ghanaian law, there's a narrow escape hatch for people accused of economic crimes against the state. It permits compensation, restitution, and reparation. The law says if you admit what you did, you can make amends with an offer to take certain corrective actions, like paying back some agreed amounts from what you stole. If the prosecution and the court find your proposal favorable, you might just be able to pay your way out of prison. You no longer get a prison sentence. Nope, instead your sentence becomes the repayment of the money or compliance with the terms agreed in the proposal. But there's a catch. Your admission of wrongdoing becomes a guilty plea and you become a convict. Additionally, whatever payment plan is agreed upon must be complied with to the letter. If you miss a payment or default on the terms agreed, the court will require you to pay the entire sum immediately, failing which you will suffer a jail term. Mr. Essien grabbed onto this lifeline, changing his plea from not guilty to guilty. Guilty of a whole collection of serious offenses, but hoping to keep his liberty. It was a massive gamble. He negotiated with the state to pay back 90 million cedis in exchange for his freedom. On November 30th, 2022, the agreement was filed and adopted by the court. The very next day, Essien made a strong statement. He paid 30 million cedis, an impressive show of good faith. It was clear that he was serious about his liberty. The deal was that he had to pay another 20 million before the end of April 2023. That gave him about 5 months. And this is where things began to dip. April 2023 came and went. Mr. Essien was only able to add 7 million Ghana cedis. I use the expression only as though it's a measly sum, but yes, in the context, it was wholly insufficient. His total payment stood at 37 million cedis, leaving a gaping hole of 53 million still owed to the state. The man who had confidently paid 30 million overnight suddenly couldn't come up with the rest. Where had all the money gone? But the court, perhaps hoping to recover the full amount, perhaps believing Essien would eventually come through, granted him grace. Adjournment after adjournment, opportunity after opportunity. 3 months passed beyond the April deadline. Then the statutory court's vacations added another 2 months. By October 2023, nearly 5 months after the deadline, Essien's balance hadn't moved up by a single cedi. His lawyers stood up in court and made an impassioned plea, begging for 6 more months. They told the court about certain assets that he had, sales of which had been hampered by certain cases in court. But the court, presided over by Justice J. Balfour, had heard enough and invited the state's lawyers to move the application, praying for jail time. The facts were clear. Essien had defaulted. But then the court found even more issues. It became evident that the assets that Essien's lawyers referred to, claiming that they could salvage things, didn't actually belong to Essien anymore. Another company had already claimed them in execution of a judgment. The assets he was counting on to save him had been seized by somebody else. The sword of Damocles had been hanging over his head and was about to fall, and fall hard. In the last-ditch attempt to save Essien's liberty, his lawyers claimed he had a $10 million water treatment plant that he could hand over to the state. $10 million, they argued, was more than enough to cover the 53 million cedi balance. Lawyer Godwin Tamakulu, who happened to be in court, stood up as a friend of the court and made an emotional plea for more time. But Justice J. Balfour had made his decision. He looked at the totality of what Essien had done: the massive amount stolen, the betrayal of public trust, the deceit and greed of a majority shareholder and CEO who had gutted and stolen from his own bank, the ripple effect that had shaken Ghana's entire banking industry, the job losses. The court considered sentencing Essien to 25 years on the first stealing count alone, but then showing a measure of mercy. The judge acknowledged that Essien had returned 37 million cedis. For that reason, the sentence was reduced to 15 years in prison. The other sentences for the remaining offenses would run concurrently. And just like that, the banker who thought he could buy his freedom faced the harsh reality of 15 years of jail time. He had lost everything. So what's the lesson here? Well, first off, liberty is priceless. Guard it with all that you can and guard it with wisdom. But the troubling irony is not lost either. It seems that if you are going to steal, make it a monumental sum from the state itself. Steal big. Steal so much that the state would rather have its money back than see you behind bars. That crime comes with a potential get out of jail free card, a chance to negotiate your freedom with the state's own money. Perhaps when you cut that deal, make sure that your offer includes houses and real estate, because liquid cash has a way of drying up when you need it the most. This forces us to ask some very uncomfortable questions. Was justice truly done in this case? Do laws that allow the wealthy to barter for their freedom actually serve the public good? And ultimately, is our goal to simply recover the loot, or is it to deliver a punishment that fits the crime? Follow Super Law GH Studios for more real stories, real cases, real people.